All the roads are winding.
Hello, Raven. I'm so excited to have you back on the show, and you're in a new place now. Hi, how are you doing?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm in Florida, and yeah, it's so interesting that I had all these dreams. I had like five recurring dreams about going back to Florida, and I was like, no, I'm not going back to Florida. I'm not going back to Florida. And then I ended up back in Florida.
Why didn't you want to go back to Florida?
I left Florida because I'm not really a fan of the heat, and I don't really like mosquitoes all year long. I like to be out in the garden without getting bitten. And I was just like, I was kind of depressed, honestly. I was kind of like, I feel like I'm just stuck inside all the time. Or if I do go out, I have to be like in the water at the beach to not get mosquito bites. And I was just like, it's time to go. And it was time. It was time for me to go. I went on a journey to Colorado and studied herbalism, and that was really great. And then I was like, oh, I think it's time for me to leave Colorado now, but I don't know where I'm going. So I ended up back here. I kind of followed my dreams back here, but part of the dream was that I'm here temporarily before going on this big adventure. So I'm really curious to see what the bigger adventure is, but I do feel like I'm in the right place right now.
Beautiful. That's amazing. And I hear you. I lived in the South in North Carolina for uh 15 years, almost, maybe more, maybe 16. And I felt the same way. It was like during the growing season, it was so hot and there were so many mosquitoes that it's like winter in a sort. You know, you can go out super early in the morning, but there's still mosquito. It's just, yeah, it's frustrating. It's
It is.
frustrating.
It is because like it's 90 degrees and I want to be like outside in my garden, but I have to wear like head to toe clothes, even like wrap my neck in a scarf so I don't get, oh my gosh, and they would bite me on my forehead. Oh,
Uh, Come on.
and
Mosquitoes.
but I don't really get mosquito bites like I used to anymore, which is really interesting. I moved back and I think I've had like three mosquito bites since I've been here, and I've been here for like 5 months now. So yeah.
What is, do you think your body changed and your body chemistry is just different? They don't
Yeah.
they're not attracted to it?
So much has changed. I've changed my diet a lot. I think that has something to do with it. I've done many combo ceremonies since in between that time, and that really kind of clears a lot of toxins from your body. And it changes the way you smell also. So I think that all has something to do with it. And then, of course, like I have a lot more herbs in my life now than I did before. Like I drink herbs all the time. So I'm sure that has something to do with it too.
That is so cool. Well, I'm
Yeah.
happy for you.
Thank you.
Well, before we begin, would you like to open up the space for us?
Yeah, so I really would like to have everyone kind of come back into their bodies. And one of the ways that we can do that is just through like tapping on our bodies and kind of waking our bodies up. So, what you're going to do is you're going to start with your right hand over your left, like right underneath your collarbone, and just start knocking here. And then you're going to knock down your arm on the top part, going down your hand, and then turn over and knock up the inside of your arm. And then you're going to do that again.
It feels really good.
Yeah, it's a really great way to just kind of like wake up your bones and come back into your body. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So first start knocking underneath your collarbone
Anybody home?
and then knock down at the top of your arm and on the inside. And then for the last part, what we're going to do is go ahead and start releasing some energy from the lungs. And so you're going to cross your hands over your chest and you're going to put your fingers right underneath your collarbone, and you're just going to like go in circles here and take a few deep breaths. On your next inhale, bring your breath all the way down into your belly. And then exhale all of the air out. And then take one more normal breath. And then we are going to do some releasing right here. So you just kind of hold your hands loosely and just knock on your sternum and open up your heart space.
If someone doesn't know what their sternum is, where is that?
So that's going to be right in the center of your body, and your chest, underneath your neck, and above your, right by your heart, but in the center. And just knock there. Okay. And now you can just let your hands down. Take one more deep breath down into your belly. And exhale deeply. Okay. And then notice any sensations that you have in your body, if there's any tingling. Those exercises are really great for bringing us back into our body, waking up our body, clearing energy on the channels and the meridians of the body. I really like opening up the heart space before coming into conversation. So, welcome, everyone.
Thank you. I love that. I wish I had arms that could tap on my back like that. I guess I could kind of reach because I feel like that would just feel so good on the whole body. Do you do that like down your legs and stuff too?
Oh, yeah, down the legs, over the adrenals and the kidneys, just knocking lightly. I've been doing Qigong a lot. So, this is something that's that's a part of my Qigong practice. So, if it's something that you like and you want to explore more, definitely look into Qigong. It's so wonderful for just energizing the body and waking the body up, and also helping to kind of smooth out our energy throughout our week.
I love that. I want to ask you about Qigong in a second, but now that you've moved, and thank you for this, I am definitely going to be doing this again. I felt such a like a relaxation. Um, Now that you've moved and you're in Florida, can you just honor and tell us who are the indigenous people of the land where you are?
Yeah, so where I am in South Florida is on Tequesta land. The indigenous people here, I mean, I was actually doing some research on the plant medicines that they worked with, because there's so much to learn about the people of the land that you're on through learning about the plant medicines that they worked with. And it's a really great way to honor those people as well, as far as honoring the ancestors of that land, to help cultivate those native plants and make offerings to those plants and give thanks, if you don't know any of the indigenous people that are there. So yeah, Tequesta land, and they work with a lot of some tree barks. One is called an aloe tree, or Georgia bark. It's a bitter, and it was helpful for malaria and reducing fevers. So, yeah, I mean, I love connecting with, or just learning those things. And because a lot of the things that we learn about herbs come from colonizers who came and took that information and then put it into their books. So if you can, do the research and find out how the indigenous people of the land that you're on work with those plants, I think that's a really great way of honoring and respecting those people, and knowing, what you can take and what you may want to leave alone for the people of the land.
Wow, I love the suggestion too of growing them and making offerings to those plants, and perhaps if there are still indigenous people living in the area, donating or offering them some of the harvests, that
Yeah,
that could be so beautiful. That's such a beautiful practice. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like I want you to write a book of all your practices. Like these are just I love every time we talk, I'm like, oh, I love hearing what you do, just in the way you approach things. So, Qigong, curious, do you take classes or did you just like learn on YouTube, or do you have like a Qigong master you practice with?
Yeah, so there's a few avenues actually. I started out with YouTube, and I found an 8 brocades practice on YouTube, and I absolutely love that. And I also found someone named Marissa Cranfill, and she has some really great videos. And there's actually, her website is called Yoqi, so YOQI, Yoga and Qigong. And
Wow, a 4-letter domain is impressive.
right? um, and so lots of really great videos on there through her subscription service. And I love supporting people like that who are sharing that information that's really healing. And then I also found Daisy Lee through the Shift Network. And Daisy Lee has a course on there where she takes you through some really great practices for people who identify as women and people who are menstruators or menstruated at some point in their lives. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be identify as a woman to do that practice, but it's really, really great. I really love it. It's taught me so much about how to work with energy for connecting with my body and my menstrual cycle, and helps to, I don't know, help me to bring balance, even more balance to my menstrual cycle through Qigong.
Thank you for those resources. I will definitely be checking them out because I know how powerful Qigong is and I'd love to learn as well. But so last time we spoke, and y'all, if you're listening, you haven't listened to Raven's first interview on the show, definitely go check it out and get the secret episode and everything. But last time we spoke, we got pretty deep. We talked about who your ancestors are. We got pretty deep into your practices with ancestral healing and healing your endometriosis and how you found how how you found balance through connecting with the herbs and the plants and smoke medicine, and then ultimately the big medicine that you work with as well. I mean, you work with so many medicines, but combo. And so if anyone's interested, definitely go check that interview out. It's beautiful. It'll be in the show notes. So today we're thinking of talking about what's shown up for you lately. And I think that actually just what you were talking about in Qigong just weaves right into it with being more in flow with your own body and your own cycles. And can you share with us, like, what does that actually look like? And maybe even share how not being in flow versus being in flow looks. Give us some context here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the menstrual cycle it's so important, and it's such a big part of how we navigate through our lives and how we create the lives that we want. And for me, getting to know your menstrual cycle, when you're out of alignment with your menstrual cycle, we tend to face um, a lot more difficulty in our path. I think being in the flow of our menstrual cycle and having our menstrual cycle as kind of like a compass for our lives can help to bring us in the right direction and get us to where we want to go without having to go through all of these kind of like trials and tribulations to get there. Because ultimately we're still going to get to where we want to go, but having our menstrual cycle as like a guide and a compass can help us to get there a little bit more smoothly. And really that starts with getting our cycles into balance. And one of the big things that a lot of us are overcoming or kind of coming to the awareness of is the impact of birth control and the impact of hormonal birth control. And a lot of times people are put onto birth control because of cyclical imbalances. And then hormonal birth control actually makes it worse over time. And I bring this up because so many of the people that I've worked with one-on-one have been going through a lot of hardship because of the impact of the pill or getting an IUD removed or things like that. And I always ask people whenever I'm working with someone, like, what did you learn about your menstrual cycle? What did you learn about what it means to bleed? And how did you learn to honor your cycle? And what was your first cycle like? And that brings up so much for people because, yeah, we don't get to really learn about our cycles. And we're not taught that our cycle is sacred and that our cycles hold guidance and information for us about the people that we're interacting with and the paths that we're on. Because when we are in alignment with our cycles, we can kind of navigate, again, we can navigate things a little bit more easily. It will show up in our bodies and it will show up in our cycles when something is aligning or when something is not. And we can use the different or work with the different phases of our cycles to tap into that wisdom. So, like, our follicular phase, that first part of our, after menstruation, the follicular phase is when we are outgoing, when we can put our ideas into action and really start to kind of like strategize and plan and get a really great plan for ourselves and something that aligns with our bodies. And then we have ovulation, which is like super connection time, really about.
Your body's like, make a baby.
Yeah, exactly. It's like make a baby or create and or connect with people or be turned on to your senses. And I love to take like baths during my ovulation, or I love to dance. I love to do anything that's going to help me feel connected to that heightened sensitivity. And then our luteal phase is like when we start to go inward and we start to get like you can also associate the luteal phase with the waning moon, and the moon is getting darker in the sky. And so we're having to, without that bright light, we have to kind of use our own internal guidance. And that's what that luteal phase is about. It's about our own internal guidance. And that premenstrual time, right before we start a new cycle, that's when, a lot of times it's like people are like, oh, I'm moody, or I'm like, the person that I'm with, I don't really like them anymore, or like all these other things come up. And really it's our body's way of letting us know that something is out of balance, and we can put those things down in a journal. And when we start menstruating, we can ask about how to shift and how to release things. So there's this whole, cycle that we have that we can get so much more from ourselves. We can grow and develop. We can thrive through having that connection to our menstrual cycle.
Thank you. And I like how you liken it to the phases of the moon. I know for me, when I'm the follicular and the, oh my God, why words are not happening for me today. Ovulation. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. At those stages, I am so turned on by life. So just like everything feels so good. It's like, it's easier to even orgasm. It's just like everything's easier. I'm like, oh, this just feels so good. And then so I have a little bit of that phase worship, but I hear you saying too of honoring all of the phases. I think honoring all the phases as being valuable, and how might that contrast with how we're kind of conditioned in our modern society of what we're taught to value versus what's actually there for us.
Yeah. In our modern society, it's totally acceptable to just shut down our cycle completely and not even bleed through these synthetic chemicals that we put into our body. And that's really huge, because our menstrual cycle isn't just about bleeding or like being uncomfortable. It's like there's so much magic in it. And there's so much wisdom in it. Everyone in the world came into this world because of the blood that we carry in our womb.
So magical.
Yeah, and it's the blood of creation. It's the blood of life, and it's something that when we're connected to our cycles, we're connected to our creativity. When we're connected to menstruation, we have an opportunity to work with that energy and create the lives that we want. And I think when we are able to shift our mindset around what it means to bleed, because, we all have experienced this where we've seen the ads for the pads where it's like this weird blue liquid, and it's not even like anything that represents blood at all. Like it's something to be shameful of. Our periods or our blood is unsanitary in some way, when it's completely, that's not true at all. Our blood is sacred, and our menstruation is sacred, and it's what carries life. And I remember one ovulation that I had where I was literally I can't even, I don't even, it's so hard to describe, but I felt like I was a rainbow woman. Like I could feel this ovulation happening and this energy just like coming out of my body of just like creation. And I could feel it in my fingertips. And it was almost like rainbows were just like coming out of, emanating out of my body, because it's that powerful when you can really start to connect. And that goes for every phase, and tuning into the energy of every phase is just a really great way to start restoring ancestral wisdom also, because our ancestors have a lot of wisdom around how to work with the phases of our cycles and different practices that they did at different phases in their moons and their cycle.
Tell us more about that and about that
Yeah.
ancestral connection.
Yeah. So when our ancestors didn't really have to deal with things like things that were shutting down their cycles. They had ways of preventing pregnancy that were natural methods, but also there's a lot of wisdom. Again, like I mentioned, how in the luteal phase we are going more inward, and that's a really great time to work with dreams. I mean, you can work with dreams at any phase of your cycle, but the luteal phase is one that comes through really strongly as a time for connecting with guides, connecting with ancestors, and working with that inward energy to gather information and guidance. And this is something that, you know, our ancestors had ways of connecting with plants, ways of connecting with their ancestors, ways of connecting with the messages from nature when they would take that time to, you know, go on their own like journey um, during their menstruation. And maybe they were just talking with other menstruators during their bleeding time, or maybe they were connecting with plants or doing some kind of traditional practice. And when I say traditional practices, these are things that maybe may seem kind of mundane to us, but things like weaving intentions into the basket for abundance, for a good harvest, those kinds of things. And also gathering information from the dream space, or gathering information um, from synchronicities and messages from nature on how to help the community and how to help future generations and things like that. So, yeah, these are kind of practices that we can incorporate. And if we give ourselves the time and the space to honor our cycles and kind of open up to the wisdom that comes with our cycle, then we can kind of start to tap into those things. And I think it's really great to, if you want to, connect with an ancestor who can share some of that wisdom with you. And this can be as simple as like um, doing a ritual where maybe you, before menstruation, ask that helpful ancestral guide who is connected to the moon and connected to menstruation and has those practices, ask for them to be with you and show up in your dreams, and see what kind of information comes through in your dream space. Because that's one of the big ways that ancestors will come through that's easier for us to connect to.
And do people have to even know who this person is specifically, or is it just those intentions of calling forward that one which carries those energies and knowledge?
I would say you don't have to know specifically. You can just ask that a healthy ancestral guide who is of your highest good come forward and teach you about your menstrual cycle, teach you about the wisdom of your menstrual cycle. And then just pay attention to anything that comes up as you go through your cycle. Pay attention to the things that you feel really drawn to. Pay attention to your dreams, of course, but also pay attention to, if you're tracking your cycle, pay attention to the different feelings that you have at the different phases that you're in. And tracking your cycle. Oh, wow, we didn't even get to that. So, tracking your cycle is really, really, really helpful for getting to know your body and getting to know um, how your energy is showing up at different phases in your cycle.
Yeah, and tracking your cycle is easy. I mean, I've done it for years now. Just when I get my period, I just go in the app and put down that I got my period. And at this point, like I can pay attention. I know like, oh, I'm ovulating. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get my period in a week. Like I can feel just based on my feelings. But if someone's new, what would you suggest for them for how to track it and how to start noticing? Like, what are they looking for even? I mean, I know you've tapped on some of this, but I'm just saying, because I feel like for people, this is so not talked about in our society that they're probably like, but how? Like, literally, what's the first, like, what's the actual step?
Yeah. So there are lots of apps out there that you can use to track your cycle. I work with an app called Kindara, and it's free. You can download it, and they actually have a lot of resources on cycle tracking there. And then there are there are lots of books on the fertility awareness method. So that's something for you to dig into, looking into the fertility awareness method, which is basically where you are tracking your symptoms, and you're tracking your temperature as well. The main things that I work with are I use my app and I take my basal body temperature, which is the temperature that you have when you first wake up before you get out of bed. And I also look at things like cervical mucus. So that is the fluid that you see on your underwear when you go to the bathroom. It's sometimes clear, sometimes white, and it changes throughout your cycle. So basically, you start paying attention to those things first. And in whatever app you're using, there's usually a way for you to put that information in. And you'll start to notice that. So the first day of your cycle is the day that you start bleeding. That's the first thing to know is when you start bleeding, that's day one, you started a new cycle. So that's when you start working with your app and you start to track your cycle over time, you'll start to notice differences in like the length of your cycle. Sometimes maybe it's 28 days, sometimes it's maybe 24 days. And as you track your cycle, you're able to kind of pick up on how things that are happening in your world, and whether it's stress at work or maybe you are moving or traveling, you'll start to notice how those things have an impact on your cycle. And that helps you to be really connected with your body. And if you have difficulty with your cycle for any reason, it's easier for you to kind of pinpoint what could be happening when you have an idea. And you can look at this graph and say, okay, my temperature went up this day, but then it kind of went down after that spike. Maybe there's something happening with your progesterone or things like that. And I know I'm kind of getting into like,
I love this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. These bigger things. But again, there are lots of books. I actually just got a book recently, and I wish I could tell you the name of it. But Fertility, Taking Charge of Your Fertility is a great one. But any books that are on fertility awareness method are going to be a really great place to start. But starting with the app, day one is when you menstruate, and start tracking your cycle that way. That's going to be the best place to start.
Thank you. Thank you for laying it out. I like that. I feel like we'll get to be like scientists, but also like wise women at the same time for our own bodies, ourselves. And when we're doing this, we're literally connecting our awareness back to the cycles of nature. And something you talk about is how this does help us go beyond this capitalism, patriarchy, and all this. Tell us more about that and how this is all connected to that and what kind of new awareness this can bring.
Yeah. So, I'm going to bring in a little bit of my own personal story into this.
Please.
So, yeah. For me, like as an entrepreneur and an herbalist and someone who is, trying to kind of break away from some of the ancestral wounding that's happened, and really kind of starting to create a foundation for myself and for future generations, because that has been disturbed by colonialism. It's really important for me to grow my business and be a force for helping people to be connected with their bodies. And so as I'm out there, like, trying to grow my business and do all these things, I kind of would go into it with a mindset of like, what I've learned about business, which is very masculine, very linear, very numbers based. And that would always get me into a place where I was really stressed out. I would have more pain with my cycles because of that stress. And it was just really unhealthy for me. And so my body, like I would have these cycles. And I'm like, oh, why do I have pain again? What's happening? And asking the questions and doing the work of asking those questions and asking my ancestors to guide me and show me like what's going on here, what's not aligned, and getting insight. And the insight that I would receive was like, you're not doing this in the feminine way. You're not doing this in a way that's aligned with your cycle. And then saying, okay, yeah, that's absolutely true. How do I do this in a way that's aligned with my cycle? And for me, that's listening to my body and trusting that I'm supported in the work that I'm doing and that I am on the right path. And that if there are challenges that I'm facing, there will be a path for me because it's not just me doing my work. I have support that is seen in friends in my community, and I also have support that's unseen. And I think with the linear view, we sometimes forget that. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in you have to do things this way, and these are the way you have to have these numbers. And it's not like that. We can grow in a way that's honoring our bodies and aligned with our cycles. So if my cycle is doing well and I'm, I notice that if I'm really pushing myself too hard, my cycle gets shorter. So instead of it being 27 days, I might have a cycle that's like 25 days. And I'm like, okay, something's going on here. Or for some people, it could be longer. It kind of really depends on what your baseline is. And that's why it's really great to start tracking your cycles and seeing over time, like what your baseline is, what's normal for you when you're operating at your most optimal. Yeah. So really kind of learning to work in a more balanced way, because I wouldn't even say purely feminine, because it's important to have the balance, and having that balance is really liberating. And it says that, if I'm really tired and my cycle is about to start, I'm going to take breaks. I'm going to take more breaks. I'm not going to have a launch of some, new course or some workshop on the first day of my cycle or on the day before my cycle starts. So those kinds of things are really, really, really helpful. And as we're able to slow down, because I think the pace of the modern world is not aligned with our bodies and our cycles. And the more of us that are taking a step back and asking for that to slow down. And one thing I would really love to see is people have time off for 1-2 days a month for menstruation, because it's our time. It's a time that we can be inward, and we shouldn't be asked to be pushed out into the world and be in this like linear masculine way when it's just not our nature. Our bodies need slowing down. Our bodies need restoration. And that's really how we can function at our most optimal. And we can actually create and do so much more when we're able to honor our bodies in that way.
So beautiful. Love it. I feel like people are having aha moments, and also just receiving permission, just hearing you talk about this. And I think too, just hearing you talk about it brings to mind how our society is so linear and has such expectations to always be producing, but nature doesn't always produce. It's, the seasons, and our cycles are many seasons, and we honor that. And by honoring the downtime for myself, just speaking for myself, honoring the downtime has made me better able to show up for and receive guidance and inspiration and put it into action in the growing season, if you will. And I think that's just huge. I love this too. And I'm just going to give people permission here too. And I know I'm extremely privileged, but this is over like a decade of bringing this into my life first, like, a few hours at a time to a few days at a time to now. I have, since I work for myself, I have literally a whole week that I block out that I'm like, nobody's scheduling meetings with me. Like I will have maybe a meeting with someone if it's there on my team and it's something I can handle, but I get so non-linear. I'm like, I don't know. I can't like think like that. It's like not, and it's amazing. I'm so much less grumpy, so much more in flow. Is amazing. And it's a
Yeah.
real luxury, but I grew that luxury from a tiny seed of carving a little time out and letting that time grow as my confidence in being supported in that grew.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important to share also. It's like, maybe you're not going from having like, working through your cycle to just having 3 days off every month, an extra 3 days off, but maybe it is just like rearranging some things on your calendar and making time for, maybe you're going to take a bath on the day before your cycle starts and creating that kind of space. Or maybe it's just like giving yourself a foot massage or something that is helping you to honor that time and asking also like your cycle is a really great um, thing that you can work with for manifestation and bringing new things into your life. So maybe you put in an intention for yourself at the start of a cycle that you would like to see some more space open up for you in your luteal phase, or you want to see some more space open up for you when you're ovulating because you want to really tap into that creative energy. Whatever it is, like asking for it is really, that's the most important thing. Is we have to also know that there's so much that we can create, and asking is the first step.
Ooh, yes, 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 yes. I love how you weave just the spirit world and the physical world together so effortlessly. What is your practice in connecting with, you know, ancestors and guides and whatever else you work with in the spirit world look like these days? And how might that have evolved or changed from when you were first getting started?
Yeah, so I think when I was first getting started, I was definitely more focused on like um, doing meditations or visualizations and connecting with guides and getting like pulling more information. And now I have this. It's a very integrated relationship that I have with my ancestors and my guides, and I feel their presence with me as I'm moving through my day. And it's less about me like going to altars and sitting at altars. It's more so about me living life, and that's really important because whether it's ancestors or spirit guides, like they're here, they're helping us and they're connected with us so that we can do our work on earth and um, to really help us in that. And so for me, like when I'm honoring my ancestors now, I'm doing it by singing songs or playing music, and it's really very integrated into my life. I do still go to my altar sometimes, especially if it's like my grandmother's birthday or something like that. There are special times that I do like to go and sit at my altar, but for the most part, for me now, it's about being connected to my family and my our living family and our living the people who will become ancestors, but being connected to who is here now, and really cultivating that connection. Also, for me, when I face a challenge in my life, um, I kind of it's just like so natural for me to say, okay, something is out of alignment here. And I just ask like, who can help me with this and show me the path forward. And it's very fluid. I ask the questions, the dreams come in, the clarity comes in. I work with plant spirits a lot also. And um, it's less doing, it's more just being. I think in the beginning it was more doing, like doing the practice of establishing that connection, and now it's there and it's a part of my being. And I think that's the way it can evolve for a lot of people. Where it's like anything else. Like if you are learning to ride a bike, you learn how to get on, and then eventually it's just like you can't not ride a bike. It's just there. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And uh, in I mean, I hear you saying too, it's almost like at first you have to learn the language, kind of like riding a bike. You have to learn how to move your body with the pedals and balance and steer and everything and brake and then you can just do it. And I feel the same way in my own practices as well. Do you still have like any daily practices where you're like an invocation where you were just inviting in your guides? Or I hear you saying you ask them for questions and support all the time, which is itself an invitation. And do you have any like daily grounding practices? I know we did the beautiful like warming up the body. Like how does that show up in your life?
Yeah. So I still, there are times when I get the guidance that it's time for me to do a specific ceremony or a ritual. So during those times when I get that something is like, maybe this is a little bit bigger than just asking. Then I will go and light a candle at my altar, leave offerings. And for a few nights, I will light a white candle. I usually will write down an intention and put that underneath the white candle that I'm burning. And I'll burn incense. I will, I'll set a certain amount of days. So usually I work with 6 or 7. Those are my numbers. It's, for you, it could be anything. For anyone, you could, you'll get guidance on what number feels good for you. But then for those nights, I will play music. I will sing to my ancestors. And it's really more about like giving thanks and knowing that I'm going to be supported in my intention. And then kind of just like letting it go. And, so that happens sometimes. And then more as far as like the day to day, I do get inspiration to burn incense. Like if I'm going to sit down and work on a project, it's part of my ritual to like, okay, let me gather up my resources to put the energy into this, because it's not just me creating, it's me and my ancestors and my guides that are all helping me, because what I'm creating is not just for me, it's for everyone. And so I want to make sure that I'm aware of that. And so I'll burn incense, and I usually make a cup of tea that I put an intention into, and I say thank you. At the end of the day, I always say thank you. So that's something I definitely do regularly, is just say thank you and express gratitude, because those times it's just so powerful to have that support and guidance. And when I get to the end of the day, I'm like, thank you so much for everything that came through, because I know it wasn't just me. I know that they are with me. So
I have straight up have chills. I love that. Feel that. Oh yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel like you sharing your practices is just opening a doorway, a portal for people to see in their own lives how this can be integrated into the way they approach their projects, the way they approach their relationship with the other world and with themselves. And it's just so exciting to hear other people talk about their little daily practices and approaches and rituals. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, of course.
And so in terms of ancestors and ancestral healing, you said something before we were recording that I thought was really interesting about how for you lately, it's not so much about ancestral healing and healing your lineage, but that working with your ancestors of healing yourself. Can you tell us about that and the kind of bigger picture of what you mean there?
Yeah. So for me, like I've definitely worked through some ancestral wounds in my endometriosis healing process. But then I got to a point where the ancestors were showing up for me, but they were showing up in a different way. And it was more so about, okay, this is all great. This lineage healing and it's important, but what about me? And what about the things that are showing up for me? And that's when I really kind of asked for guidance on how to release some of the unhealthy patterns that I was still going through. And it's really about being able to live and thrive, and live in a really vibrant expression of yourself, and live without fear, and live without holding back. And because when you're holding back, you're not only holding yourself back, but you're holding back your ancestral expression also, and your ancestral voice. So being able to kind of break through some of those barriers and learn how maybe some ancestral traumas could still be showing up in how you carry yourself and how you walk through the world. For me, that was really big. One of the things that really kicked this off for me, I mean, it started before that, but I think when I did a fast for 3 days, and I was doing a tea fast. So I was drinking tea, and that was the only thing I was consuming for 3 days, tea and water. And it brought up a lot of insight around my relationship with food and how I was still using food as as a bandage for a deeper wound. And I wasn't really working through the wounding that I was still exhibiting and the patterns that I was still going through, as far as like turning to food as a distraction. Like during the fast, I remember I sat down and I was going to watch a movie, and I was like, "Oh, I want some popcorn." And I was like, "Oh, maybe maybe this is like, I mean, the movie and the popcorn. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still have movies and popcorn. But I'm aware of when the movie and popcorn is a distraction from my work and putting my voice out into the world, because I definitely see how, like I would sit down to work and then all of a sudden I would get hungry, even though I had just eaten. I'm like, wait a minute, something is going on here. This isn't I'm not actually hungry. What's happening? And those kinds of things came to the surface and helped me to see that, yeah, I was afraid of sharing my voice and I was afraid of speaking up about things. And I think with the menstrual cycle and really living as a cyclical being and honoring the menstrual cycle and embracing the power and the wisdom of the menstrual cycle, that's a really big thing. And that's something that I think a lot of us have experienced wounding around, because our ancestors have, the feminine in general has been suppressed so much. And anyone who bleeds, anyone who has that experience has probably experienced some kind of shutting down of the feminine in some way. So speaking out about that is scary, because it's ancestral. And I see it in so many of the people that I work with, of connecting with the menstrual cycle, and living from that is a scary thing sometimes, because we've been taught to suppress it, and it still shows up in our modern world about that suppression. And that suppression goes back to times when people could be hurt for speaking up because they came into the world in a feminine form. So,
bam, mic drop.
yeah.
Cool. So that's just again and again, I just hear you speaking of liberation through connecting with your cycle and bringing forward that feminine and your creative voice, and not only connecting with your cycle, but connecting with your ancestors and the earth and your guides and your expression. And it's so simple yet so powerful, and also so complex all at the same time. It's all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a thing about the feminine. It's, a lot of times it's associated with being like soft and reserved and quiet, but that's like the opposite of the feminine, because I mean, think about creation, and the womb. I mean, it's dark, it's unknown, it's this void kind of space that everything comes from, life comes from. It's very, very powerful. And I think it's, I talk about the feminine, but I want to also emphasize that it's about the balance. It's about balancing the masculine and feminine. And it's not one or the other is better. It's having both in balance. And I think all of us are seeking balance in our feminine and in our masculine. But for so many of us, we've been taught to suppress the feminine, but regardless of the form that you came into the world in, the suppression of the feminine has been such a strong thing. So bringing that back and living in that and creating space for that, it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And so I know for you, plant allies are such a big part of your journey. And well, not just plant allies, but all kinds of nature allies. And I'm curious if there's any nature allies showing up for you in a big way right now, and what are they showing up? What messages or awareness are they showing up with?
Yeah. For me right now, the big thing has been clarity. Um, Clarity because I'm working through a lot as I'm like creating, and this goes for everyone. Whenever you have like some project that you're working on, whether you are focused on fertility, maybe you want to have a child, or you're working on like a big project or a work project or something that you're putting out into the world, it's going to bring up all kinds of things. It brings up all kinds of stuff about, and then you work through these old unhealthy habits and patterns as you are creating and putting new things into the world, because it's the journey of life. So for me, working with plant allies that are helpful for clarity, because I'm like, I want to kind of get through things. And like, if there's something that's holding me back, I want to know about it. I don't want to like take weeks or months to kind of have this aha moment. So I've been working with a lot of herbs for mental clarity, visionary herbs, and not visionary in the sense of like psychedelic, but more so having a lot of mental clarity and being able to have visions come through about what could be happening and insights coming through. So Bacopa is a big one for me. Bacopa. It's an herb that I absolutely love for supporting brain health, but also for dream work. It's really powerful for dream work and really powerful for just receiving clarity and insight. Anytime I have something that I have a question about and I'm working with Bacopa, the answer is coming through like so fast. So I love to work with that. And then rosemary is another one. I like rosemary because it's also connected to remembrance. And so remembering our ancestral wisdom, remembering our purpose and kind of like the vision that we had for ourselves when we came into the world, and remembering that each step of our journey is important, and being able to gather wisdom from things that may appear to be challenges. I think that's one of the reasons I love rosemary. So bacopa, rosemary, and lavender has been a big one also, because sometimes these things that we are, the patterns that we're releasing, it's tough. And lavender is really helpful for supporting our nervous system and bringing it back a sense of calm. And lavender is also an herb that helps to support the nervous system in like rebuilding the myelin sheath. So we are able to make new, like expand our nervous system and have these neural connections be supported. And that's really important because it helps us to receive more information also. So supporting the nervous system is great in the physical sense, but also in the sense that we're able to receive greater insights and more insights and expanded insights. And I think it helps tremendously when we are digging into really deep personal work and healing work.
Yeah, and the nervous system's where it's at. It is everything. Yeah. How are you working with these herbs? Smoke, infusions? What's how?
So rosemary, I'm mostly working with as a tea, but I am also cooking with rosemary a lot. Bacopa and lavender, I'm working with in tea form. And I also have a tincture that I'm working with right now, which I'll share. It is Schisandra berry, Bacopa, and what is this herb? Peony root. So peony root is more for supporting the menstrual cycle, but for me, it's also about that connection between healthy menstruation and what's happening in my headspace, and having that connection be really open and clear. So Schisandra berry is a really great nervous system supporting herb. It's an adaptogen, and it's a really great liver supporting herb as well. And all of these things work together as far as like having the connection between your cycle and kind of like your vision and what you're moving towards in life. And also having that support with the nervous system. So yeah, and then lavender, I've been making these lavender limeades, which are so good. It's lavender tea with bacopa, marshmallow root, and lemon balm. Really great nervous system supporting herbs. head support, mind space, headspace supporting herbs, and also gut supporting herbs, which is really important. And I make the tea and then add some lime juice to it, and it's just so good.
And it's so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be your neighbor so I can come over and be like, what kind of tea did you make today? And I'll bring something that I made, and just like little like potluck party. So like you always have something so delicious and just sensual happening. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is super, super fun to talk with you and just get a peek into your world. Well, I guess first I'll say you're going to lead a workshop on ancestral dreamwork and how people can actually begin to cultivate that connection. Do you want to say a few words about that or just share with people that? Yeah.
Yeah. So ancestral dreamwork is so powerful. And I wanted to do a workshop on ancestral dreamwork specifically because for me, starting out with connecting with ancestors, dreams were the most powerful thing. And I like dreams because if you're someone who feels like maybe you're getting information, but you can't really trust it, and you're not really sure if what you're getting is real, dreams can be so helpful because your mind is off when you're dreaming. So you're in receptive mode, you're able to receive. And that's a really great way to open up that connection and be able to start to notice how your ancestors are showing up for you and the symbols that they could be sharing with you. And once you start to develop that connection with your ancestors, ancestral dreamwork is a tool that I use still. Like, it's one of the ways that I connect with my ancestors when I'm like intentionally asking for guidance. Dreamwork is the thing that I turn to. So it's something that's a really great way to start, but it's something that can carry you through your work with your ancestors for the rest of your life. And I think that's really powerful. And it's something where you don't need anything outside of yourself. You can establish that connection. Maybe you work with some herbs to help you along with that, which we'll talk about. I'm so excited to talk about that because there are lots of really great herbs that can help us. And creating that connection with ancestors, knowing how they're showing up for you, being able to recognize themes in your dreams and recognize like different like chronicles and different like themes that will show up throughout your life in your dreams that you can say, oh, this is familiar. Let me look back and see what was happening in my life at this time when that showed up. And looking at, it just brings in so much valuable information. And if you're having questions about how to navigate a certain area of your life, or you want to just learn more about yourself and what could be blocking you and how to move past those blocks, ancestral dreamwork is really, really powerful tool. And it's a really safe way to work with healthy ancestors and develop your spiritual practices and bring a whole new like level and of awareness to your path in your journey through gathering more information from the unseen. And as you start to do that, it's easier for you to gather information from the unseen in your waking life too. So that's really cool.
Like the symbols kind of translate, or you can read the symbols and stuff more as well.
Yeah.
Love it. Wow. Yeah. My dreams have been off the hook lately. I'm like, oh my God, I have so many. And then I remember them. Like, this is really special. So I'm excited that my brain is like, and my ancestors are like gearing up for me to really receive this workshop. I'm like, okay, I'm really prepping here.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such powerful work. And it's something that, when I was a kid, I didn't really have the guidance in how to navigate all of this. And I remember I would have these really powerful dreams that were really scary because I was a kid. I didn't know how to process that information. I was having dreams about like snakes and spiders and like just like really intense things happening. And, if I were born 400 or 600 years ago, there would be elders around to help me navigate that. So a lot of this I had to learn on my own, and a lot of it I learned through connection with my ancestors and connecting with plant spirits, and also talking to other people and learning from teachers. But being able to have this knowledge and this wisdom is really important. It's something that, you know, again, many generations ago would have been standard. It would have been a normal practice to have. So I think it's really important to kind of put these things back into place, so we have these ancestral ancient tools for us to help navigate this modern world and help us to really kind of like expand and thrive in more ways than we would if we were just kind of like relying on, again, like the linear the linear way of doing things. There's so much more than that.
I love it. And I just realized like this might be really helpful for parents as well who want to help their children with their dreams, with you talking about your experience as a child. And I remember me and my sisters as well having like, you know, some of my sisters just having nightmares and not knowing how to deal with them and how to read them. And that's so cool. So cool. Well, that's all at our website, y'all, earthspeak.love. But tell people what you offer and what you might have coming up and where they can find you.
Yeah, so I am on moonmedicine.co. That's my website. Right now, I am still offering one-on-one sessions, but I won't be offering them in 2021. So if you're interested in doing one-on-one, then definitely this is the time to do it. And right now, like I mentioned earlier, I have a really, really amazing course called Birth Control Detox that's going to be in December, and the registration is going to be open in November. So signing up for the newsletter on my website, that's the best way to find out about that. Birth Control Detox is, again, it's going to be the hormones and everything, but we are also going to get into so much more about how to come into alignment with your cycle and how to start working with your cycle as a really great tool and a really great connection point for how we're connecting with nature and our bodies. So I'm also on Instagram at Moon Medicines.
Beautiful. And those are all, of course, in the show notes, y'all. And definitely go check them out. And just so much gratitude. Thank you for bringing your magic and medicine to the show and to sharing with us and to the workshop and just what you do and be in the world. It's such a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Totally.
All the roads are windy.
Listen to over 200 free EarthSpeak podcast episodes on your favorite podcast app and visit earthspeak.love to learn about our collective community and workshops.